Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to share with you the creative inspiration and the creative process behind my handcrafted journal called Mansion Walls. By the way, I have the air conditioner running right now, so if you hear this kind of low humming tone, that's what that is. Hopefully that's not too distracting. So anyway, if you saw my last video, then you know that I am going to start making 2 videos per journal, the normal flip through video as well as this kind of video where I share the creative inspiration behind the journal. So I thought that I would continue right along with that theme and talk about one of my favorite journals I've ever made. So Mansion Walls is a journal that I released last fall, I believe, and at the time that I am making this video right now, it is still available for sale, so I will go ahead and link the listing as well as the flip through video down in the description box below if you are interested. So there's a couple reasons why this journal is so special. First of all, it is in the Victorian Gothic style or aesthetic, and that is my favorite aesthetic of all time. But also, and more importantly, this journal is the first one I ever made that was based off of one of my own poems, and it has that poem printed on the title page. So last year was kind of like a big deal in my life for a variety of reasons, and starting to weave my poetry into my journals is one of those reasons. Like, I cannot even describe how it felt to start weaving my poetry into my journals. I don't even know still if I have the words for what that feels like. Whatever level of self-expression I was at before, weaving my poetry into things just like shot that level of self-expression up to the next stratosphere. I've only done it twice, I think. I think I've only made 2 journals based on one of my poems, I think. But this was the first one. So what I'm going to do is just talk a little bit about the poem itself, what inspired the poem, and then I'm going to transition into talking about the book. So let me take the closure off of the journal so that you can see it better. So you have this gorgeous damask black fabric cover. I mean, are you kidding me? Like, I can't even. I'm obsessed with this fabric. And then you open it, and on the inside, it's just like red explosion in your face. So, but I'll talk about those details more in a second. You flip open the tissue guard, and there's the poem on the title page, okay? So the poem is the title page. So I'm gonna go ahead and read the poem to you now and then talk about how I came up with it. Mansion walls and towering halls laced with gloomy apprehension. Every room I find has a presence deep inside, stillness watching, waiting, bleeding tension. At last the sun begins to set, pale shadows are revived, encroaching darkness presses in, the mansion is alive. Okay. So that poem is also written in the listing. If you didn't understand something that I said, you can go to the listing for this journal and the poem is written right there. So this poem I wrote weeks or maybe even months before I made this journal, and I wrote the poem just to write it. Like, I had no intention of translating it into a journal. And that poem was directly inspired by my undying love of Edward Gorey. If you know me, if you know, you know. I don't have to tell you. If you don't know, Edward Gorey is one of my greatest inspirations. I've made a couple of videos about him. I will also link down below the video where I review Edward Gorey's biography called Born to be Posthumous, and in that video I talk a little bit about how I discovered him and why he means so much to me, why I resonate with him so much. So one of the more consistent themes throughout Edward Gorey's work is old mansions, specifically like old mansard style mansions. And I am obsessed with architecture and old mansions. So what I did, I remember so vividly, I went to bed and I laid down. This was during the day. I went to bed and I just laid down and I closed my eyes and I pictured myself in one of Edward Gorey's mansions. You know, my own version of an Edward Gorey style mansion. And I just laid there with my eyes closed and I kind of let myself wander through the whole place, like room to room. I took my time, I soaked everything in, and I just really let myself be there and let it kind of unfold in this organic exploration. And I remember the ceilings were like 50 feet tall. I mean, this is like my surrealistic dream fantasy version of this mansion, right? The ceilings were like 50 feet tall. There were floor to ceiling windows, but they were really, really skinny or narrow. Red velvet furniture everywhere. Red velvet curtains everywhere. Like dark old wood furniture, like desks as well, books everywhere. There were like corridors that were so long you really couldn't see where it ended. I mean, it just went on and on and on. And eventually, like, first of all, I noticed I am alone. There's nobody here. There's nobody anywhere. I'm completely alone in this mansion. And the visualization started during the day, but as I continued on in the visualization, the day progressed and it started, you know, the sun started to set. And I felt, or I noticed as the sun was setting, the energy is changing in this space. And it felt like the mansion itself was like stirring almost. And by the time it was completely dark outside, full nighttime, the mansion literally had come alive. It's really hard to describe, but it's almost like the mansion woke up, and part of that also included any spirits or ghosts that were living in the mansion. They also woke up at night. So during the daytime, there was just this almost eerie kind of stillness and peacefulness, total silence. But then nighttime is when the mansion and all the ghosts were awake, and there was a lot of movement and like different sounds happening. And anyway, so that whole visualization was what birthed that poem. And I speak to all of that in the poem. In the beginning, you know, mansion walls and towering halls laced with gloomy apprehension. There's just, again, this like eerie stillness, this apprehension, stillness, watching, waiting, bleeding tension. At last the sun begins to set, blah, 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 blah. The mansion is alive. So that poem is literally me like describing the visualization that I went through. And I knew when I wrote that poem that it was special to me. Like, this doesn't have to be special to anybody else. This is my artwork I do for me. I knew when I wrote that poem that it was really particularly special, but I sat on it for a few weeks. You know, I just wrote it down in my little poem journal. And then at some point, I don't remember what triggered it, but I just had the thought, like, what if I made a journal called Mansion Walls, and this poem was the title page, and the journal is like the mansion in book form. And as soon as I had that idea, it was like being struck by lightning. I knew it was gonna happen. And I have had this black damask fabric for a really long time, several years, I think. And I immediately knew it's gonna be with this fabric, and it all came together pretty quickly. So, in my mind, this black damask fabric is like a piece of wallpaper from the mansion, and then this red velvet end paper, I'll just take the bookmark away so you can see better. This red velvet end paper speaks to like the curtains and the furniture that were in the mansion, and I don't know if you can tell, but it's literally raised. These like swirly shapes are raised, and they are actually velvet. It's just so beautiful, and I love the contrast of having one like color theme on the front, and then you open it up and it's like totally different. I love that. I've really noticed that about myself lately. I never did it intentionally, but I think I have a habit of picking end papers that are like a high contrast to the front of the cover. I just really like that. So anyway, this is like wallpaper, and then this is like the furniture and the curtains in my mind. And then because this end paper is literally velvet and it's raised, I couldn't put the nameplate on it. I couldn't glue anything to it or it would be all bumpy. So I put the nameplate on the tissue guard. I think this was the first time that I ever did that, putting the nameplate on the tissue guard. And I'm obsessed with it. Like, I think it looks so good. I was worried that it was going to be weird, but I think it looks so good. Yeah. So anyway, so then you open it, and like I said, it's the poem, and it has the red velvet bookmark, of course, and it's fully loaded with stuff. I knew that this was going to be one of my more highly detailed journals because I just really wanted it to be this totally immersive experience, almost like recreating that visualization that I had where I was walking through the mansion. As you flip through this journal, I want you to feel like you're walking through that mansion. So there's tons of stuff. There's tons of stuff. I mean, all kinds of pockets and all the things. If you're familiar with my work, then you know there's all the things. Digital stamps, regular hand stamps, pockets, tuck spots, ephemera, stickers, tabs, charms, all of the things. Let's see if there's anything in particular that I feel like showing you. Oh wow, some of the pages. Like I also wanted to make sure that the coffee stains on the paper were really, really pronounced, like that. I love that. That looks so good. Let's see. Blah, 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 blah. This is another good one. So I don't remember exactly how many pages it is. All of the information, of course, is in the listing. It's pretty thick. This was a really cool piece of ephemera, the skull. This was also, I don't remember if this was the first journal that I ever did this. If it wasn't the actual first journal, it was one of the first, where I added these threads hanging down the bottom. I forget what they're called exactly. I got this idea from Nick the Booksmith. If you don't know who Nick the Booksmith is, I highly recommend you check her out. Just type Nick the Booksmith into YouTube and go down that rabbit hole. She's amazing. And she got this idea from somebody else. So it's kind of one of those ideas that has been passed down from one to another in the world of bookbinding. I just really wanted to try it. I feel like it kind of just, it's subtle, but it just adds that extra, like, something. I don't know what. Sometimes I don't, you know, more often than not, I don't add these threads. But every once in a while, I can just tell that, like, a journal wants this extra detail. So I had no idea what I was doing. I don't sew in my journals at all. Oh, this is another cool page too. I used some of my spider web lace kind of as like a tuck spot at the top. So let's see if I can find a good example here. Ooh, this is another good page. I forgot how cool this was. I didn't forget, but like certain details. I haven't looked at it in a while. This is like a dual pocket over here. Let me find a page where, okay, so you can see here, like down at the bottom, I just took some of my upholstery thread. I didn't use the thread that I use for binding because that's really thick, and it just wouldn't have the right look. So I used some upholstery thread that I have, which is really, really thin and slippery. And I would just go through different pages and I would sew like little X's or little like zigzags or whatever, and then just leave the tail of the thread hanging off the bottom. So yeah, here's another cool sticker. I could go through this whole book one page at a time, but that's what the flip through video is for. So if you want to see that, you can click the link down below. This was also, I think, the first journal where I ever put ink splatter on the spine. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this was the first. You probably know that I put ink splatter a lot on the pages of my journals, you know, on the inside, because I'm going for pretty much the most aged look possible. But I had never put ink splatter on the spine before. And it's subtle, but you can see there's like a blob there, and there's just some speckles throughout. I was really nervous because the journal was like completely done, and I didn't want to ruin it, but I was like, you know what, I have to take a risk, and I think it looks really cool. I really, really like it. So anyway, that's kind of the general idea. It's already been 17 minutes. I've probably told you enough. But anyway, so this journal is one of my all-time favorites. Of course, it was going to be tall and skinny. There was no way it wasn't going to be tall and skinny. Again, because in my mind, this mansion is like surrealistically, like palatially tall, and all the windows again were like really like floor to ceiling but narrow. So the tall and skinny in my mind just kind of spoke to that dream-like quality. So yeah, that's basically it. It started with a poem, which then inspired the book, and it's just my version of a mansion. So again, I want you to feel kind of like you are walking through the mansion as you're working your way through the journal. And really the most important part to me was just conveying this idea that spaces are alive. Spaces and places are alive. Buildings are alive to me. I've always experienced life that way. Whenever I walk into a new space, it's like meeting a new person, right? So I really I loved being able to convey that idea through the poem, that the mansion sleeps during the day and then wakes up at night, and you're not as alone as you might think. So anyway, hopefully you enjoyed this as much as I enjoyed making it. All the links are down below. If you have any questions or comments, let me know. I would love to hear from you, and I will see you again soon. Bye.